Welcome to the Learner Center Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Martin, and I've been looking forward to this conversation with Michelle Culver for far too long. Michelle is a visionary leader, educator, and convener committed to reimagining human connection in an age shaped by technology. With over 2 decades of experience spanning classrooms, national education initiatives, and social innovation, she began her journey as a teacher in Compton before leading large-scale programs at Teach for America that impacted more than 200,000 students. As the founder of the Rithm Project, Michelle now brings together youth, educators, communities to explore what it means to be deeply human in an era of AI. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Katie. It's so good to be here.
It is so great. I am so excited. We've already been jumping into many conversations as moms, and I'm excited to dive into a little bit more of your experience. So let's start from the beginning. What are some of those early experiences or that you've had that have shaped you into the leader that you are today?
Oh, wow. Um, okay. Early experience. I think I might start actually by talking about when I was a high school student myself, since our own experience with learning defines and shapes our worldview for learning. And maybe the first one I would just describe was this out of school learning experience that I had in the summer. I was a part of an organization, first as a delegate called, and then as a staff member. And the organization is called Maryland Leadership Workshops. And what I loved about this particular magical place is it's only a week-long program, but it pulls kids from all over the different parts of the state. So it is extraordinarily diverse racially, socioeconomically, religions, rural, urban, like the whole reflection of society are coming together. And you're tasked with not only just self-reflecting and going through workshops that help you understand your own leadership orientation, but you're tasked with a real world problem. And so it was the first moment where I got a chance to grapple with while they were simulations, they felt such consequential choices that we were trying to work through from all of these different vantage points. And it's just a really joy-filled environment. So it's an opportunity to just have that productive struggle. But there's so many moments where the organization invests in like the games and the joy and the relationships that get interwoven. And here I am, an adult, many decades later, still connected to some of those same people. Yeah, so that was like the first one.
Well, that's amazing. And it's like a week and it's so pivotal in your experience. Like there's a lot of things we could do in a week.
That's right. I mean, that's right, right. And they're skill based, but it's also worldview. It's the first time I fell in love with someone who was of a different race. It was the first time I thought of myself as a leader. I was tasked with putting that identity on and then living into it, both successfully and unsuccessfully. And so I just think those are like real character forming opportunities that I wish were accessible for all kids. And then maybe the second one I would say is just my formative experience right out of school in the classroom. So I graduated and entered into the classroom in Compton in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I don't have to tell your listeners about the power of being a classroom teacher, but there's something for me that happens for so many of us, which is when you fall in love with your students as though they are your own. I just became unwilling to accept the statistics or the odds for their trajectories and lives. And so what I thought was going to be a 2-year commitment through Teach for America ended up becoming 2.5 decades on the senior team. So that had an outsized impact on my life in a way that I'm so grateful for. And then maybe the third one is actually just as a mom. We were talking about being moms earlier, but the moment in which I enrolled my daughter in school, my oldest, as a kindergartner was a real uh, reflection point for me because I made a choice to put her at a school that was quite unconventional. Actually, it's a highly learner-centered school here in Denver called the Logan School. And when I enrolled her, the very first thing that they did is they asked this 5-year-old, "Well, what do you want to study?" And we had just seen some community theater earlier, so she said, "I want to study plays." And then they took her on a personalized field trip to sit next to a female director while she was casting. And they'd prepped Elsa like with the kinds of questions she could ask, this director to understand how that learning works in the context of the real world. And then she comes back and they match this 5-year-old with an older buddy from the middle school. And that buddy worked with her to write her own play. So she,
Incredible.
took her ideas. It gets even more wild. So then my daughter, who's 5, takes her kindergarten peers and directs and casts them into this play that she created, and they together perform it in front of the whole school. And so I sat in the audience while this was happening, and admittedly, I just lost my shit. I was just
I would say, are you just bawling?
I was I was crying. And in part I'm crying because I was just so proud to see my daughter in that way. It was such a profound thing to witness her stepping into her voice at such a young age in that way. But I was also crying because I think I was having a moment of real humility. I'd helped to create the content and curriculum and scale it to thousands of leaders at Teach America around this idea of having high expectations for all young people. But it had never occurred to me that a 5-year-old could do that. And it prompted me to start to think about all the other questions that I had been missing over the course of my career. I'd spent 20 years at that point in education, and I wasn't asking really about, why are we learning the same way? Or, what are the outcomes we're most prizing at that school? Curiosity and your ability to drive your own learning is the sort of North Star. So it's like, why are we learning? What are we learning? Where are we learning? Is it, stuck in a classroom or in the context of the real world? Of course, these are all your principles. What, why, where, with whom? So not just a classroom teacher, but seeing her with, all of these people who do the work and who are older buddies and peers. And that was exquisite. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to make that choice for myself because of our own privilege and the fact that that school exists near me. And so I just got, really curious about how you make more of these models available for more young people. Not to say that that's the model or the right answer for every kid or family, but we were able to make that choice. And so what would it look like for everybody to be able to have, to be able to move from a one size fits all fails most to a suite of options of which learner-centered models were really possible. So yeah, that's I think what shaped my worldview up until now. Yeah.
Wow. I am so struck by that. One, I need to go visit the school because
Well,
I love seeing all these different models and to really just start at such a young age, like you said, and say, what do you want to learn? And then take it to have that opportunity. But what's really just standing out to me, and you said it, your curiosity. I think that is so compelling because so many people see a new model and they're like, "Oh no, I've done something wrong," or
yeah.
"That's scary, I don't wanna try it," and your ability to say, "Wow, I've been in this for 20 years, and there's more questions that I haven't been asking, there's more things I could be thinking about," I think just says a lot about who you are, and I would as more educators can lean into that space and not say be defensive about how it's been done, but be curious about what's possible.
I love you. I love you giving me that credit. I'll actually have to say that was in part with a nudge from my husband, and that was the unlikely person for it to come from. I discovered the school actually because I was observing just as an educator who was curious to learn about different models, but it didn't occur to me that it would be something that we would choose for our own family because I sort of assumed I would come in with a critical lens. And it's not perfect. No model is perfect, but that was the way I showed up for the school. And then I ended up clearing my calendar and staying the whole time. And I couldn't stop talking about it to my husband, who then went and observed because I thought, well, maybe this could be a choice for our own family. And he was one who came home and was, initially not excited about it because that was not what he was expecting me to propose. And he left and he said, my husband works in tech. So he had at the time, and it came from IDEO as a background. So design and then tech. And he left the school and he said, Michelle, this is how the real world works. These are the skills that we're expected to be able to do as professionals. Why wouldn't we have our kids start in a classroom like this, practicing the way the real world works from the very beginning? So it was funny because his outside lens, not as somebody who was invested in education, was actually the thing that sort of prompted us to make that move.
That's amazing, and I'm, like, listening to you thinking about that. You said initially being critical and thinking, "This isn't what I'd expect or a typical school," and it feels different, right? To make that choice, we're used to the typical school, and you go and you sit in classes and you have one teacher, and that feels comforting. But to your point, your husband, who's in, in a different field, can say, no, 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 these are the skills that we need to be really focusing on.
Mhm.
And I love that vision of, can we have more options for more young people to choose that doesn't feel weird or doesn't feel different, but it feels like the norm. What an amazing opportunity that would be for all kids.
Hmm. Beautifully said.
So, so is your daughter still at the school?
Yeah, both of them actually now. I have my oldest is now an eighth grader, and my youngest is now a fifth grader.
So cool. So very cool. So thinking about, in our classrooms and our communities, and connection being a big part of coming together and being in these spaces, it's something you're known for, being able to create these spaces, to bring people together to think about what's possible. And largely, in part, I am imagining, because of your curiosity and your ability to do that. But I'm curious if you've thought about, what are the essential ingredients? Like, what is most important when you're thinking about bringing people together for any gathering that really fosters that meaningful connection?
Yeah, great. I love this question because it's something we're having. I'm having so much fun convening these days. It's bringing me so much joy. So thank you for that opportunity to get meta about it. Maybe I should say too, in our work in the Rhythm Project, we are focused on this intersection of human connection and AI. It's spelled rhythm, RITHM, like an algorithm to suggest that we have agency in the relationship we have with technology, and we should do that alongside the heartbeat of humanity. And I think that matters because those beliefs sort of ripple out from the way in which we then convene, given that there are such core convictions in who we are and the purpose of why we gather. So I would say maybe the first thing I do is consider, what is the intention? What is the purpose behind bringing people together? And for us, it's because we want to have a real robust conversation about what's going to happen at this intersection of the decline in human connection and the arrival of generative AI. And that is not for us to teach. Our purpose is not to teach people, but rather to come together and say, well, what do you want to have happen? This is not a foregone conclusion. We often talk about the future as though it's singular and predetermined. But if you put futures and S at the end of it, all of a sudden we have all of these futures that we could create. And our purpose is to invite people into honing their own point of view and then acting their way into those possible futures. And so for us, part of the next question is then who needs to be in the room in order to manifest that purpose? And in my mind, especially in the very beginning when we were realizing that this conversation was so often missing in education, I realized it would be incomplete to just convene, educators and even students for that matter. So in order to have a really robust discussion about these forces that are impacting our learners, but may or may not just be what's happening in a classroom setting, I thought, well, gosh, we need to have, of course, educators and of course, young people, but also technologists and mental health professionals and researchers and philanthropists and policymakers. And together, then all of a sudden, we have a really robust set of perspectives from which to refine our own points of view, and get into, like, I would say really rigorous discourse about what we want to see happen. So, and then we don't want to just talk about human connection. We want to be human connection. And so a lot of it is creating the conditions for that kind of relational trust and joy to come through. I have to credit Sarah Salim, who's one of our facilitators, who's an exquisite facilitator on the somatics. So she opens our spaces in nature and helps us connect to our bodies first, and then to each other, and then to the broader context around us. And by the end, she has us singing, and she has us, in embodied exercises. And I think that matters both because it's such a good practice for learning. We all know that when our bodies arrive, the brain research is pretty clear that it opens us up for learning. But it is also for us a core concept in our worldview. Like, I really believe that as AI comes on, this is a powerful force. We need to dial up those ancient technologies these things that have helped us convene and be humans, to grieve, to laugh, to learn, to be together as people for millennia. We need to dial that up as at the same time that we introduce these artificial intelligences. So if we could hold those things together alongside each other, I really do think that's the world we want to create. And so it means that we have to like be that from the very beginning. And then maybe the last thing I would say is our real conviction is that our role is to let the group do the work, not for us to assert a point of view, but to offer a set of provocations and then spaces for people to make meaning on their own. So for us, that looks like playing games that are forcing conversations about, the degree to which human connection is going to strengthen or erode our relationships. It might mean doing some tech demos so people can then react. Well, what do you think? Is this going to strengthen or erode human connection? We do something called immersive AI futures, where we invite people to time travel. And we've done this, it's inspired by futurist Stuart Candy. And we built it in partnership with Odd Knock Productions, who's an incredible group of creators and performers. And so what you do is you step into the year 2040, and then you do that 4 times over, 4 different rooms. And the actors engage you as though you're just in that future. So you're signing up for a consumer product or you're at a birthday party. And the point is not to say this is the future because we don't know, nobody knows. But what we want to do is give you a visceral, experiential sense of what it could be, a possible future, so that by the time you come out, you are dying to talk with other people in the room about what about this possible future do you want to pull towards you? What about this do you want to mitigate against? And then most importantly, what does it mean we need to do today in order to craft the future that we want in 2040? So yeah, it's not us telling you what to think, but instead where to look and inviting the conditions where we can debate those ideas from many different perspectives in a joy-filled way.
I love that. And it's so powerful in a space where, we're more divided than ever in spaces and have different perspectives to come together and have an experience to discuss. And I know you have your cards and your games. So these tools that allow people who don't know what questions to ask, maybe, or don't even know how to imagine something, to be able to come together and think through their values, possible futures, and how we might need to shape that possible future, like you said, the multiple futures. Um, I'm wondering if can you take us into one of those possible futures? Like what are is one of those scenarios, since I can't even imagine 2040 right now. What should I be thinking about?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think about which one is the one to describe, in part because they all surface different tensions. And in surfacing those different tensions, there is a way in which they give a piece of a storyline. So maybe the one I'll take you into is most related to school, which is the moment where, as a parent or a future parent, if you're not yet a parent, because you play yourself in this, you're you, but in the years 2040, you're signing up for a consumer product. And this world building experience is asserted that there has been regulation that means that the technology has been taken out of public schools. And so this is a company that is trying to sell you for your own kids' benefit um, uh, an AI resource that will allow them to not only leverage the best of what we see AI do in supporting academic learning, it will also help your child be there as a voice in their ear, literally, as it gets demoed in the experience, a voice in their ear to help them in those awkward social moments or to show up differently in the world that represents themselves that will allow them to, get ahead. And so very quickly you start to understand that this may not be a choice you want to make as a parent. Perhaps you have some legitimate concerns about what it would feel like to have your child going through the world in such a tech assisted way. Maybe you're delighted by it, but either way, it becomes really clear that that's a choice that those with privilege are gonna have at least more options. And so it forces a real question about equity immediately, about who's gonna get the benefits and who's gonna be left behind with these emerging technologies. And then you have to make a choice with all of these different functions, and you grapple as a parent with whether or not you should get the reports of everything that's happening in their day, or is that private for them? Um, and then where does that data go? And who's guiding them? So if there's a voice in their ear, which influences are guiding those voices? And do you want to choose them? Do they choose them? Does the company choose them? So there's all the downstream choices about something like that. And I think what I most often hear from people who've come out of that experience is what they feel is societal pressure. I have to make an individual choice because
Yeah.
all these forces are moving around me, and I don't have enough time to get clear on what I really believe. And the stakes feel high because it's my kid. And so I think that's where the conversation usually gets really juicy. And you see some real differences in opinion about it based on where people are coming in, both culturally and generationally.
Wow. I am really wrestling with that now. I mean, I can only imagine. I had never imagined that those were things, and maybe I should have, that would be choices to make. Or when I think about my kids and their kids, the choices they'll be making. That is a lot to wrestle with. And I think the fact that you're putting people in those situations, I can only imagine the conversations between youth and educators and mental health professionals, like you said, different generations, um, grappling with that. And what a powerful space. And we need more of it, right?
I do. I think the biggest thing I'm learning these days from our work in the Rhythm Project is that folks are hungry to be a part of shaping a future that often feels really outside of them. But we kind of defer to, first of all, our own busy lives and the things we're accountable and responsible for, which makes complete sense. But often the narratives that say tech is either all good or all bad, or um, you don't see yourself in those decision making based on your gender or identity or age. And so part of what I think I keep finding is that folks really want to have these conversations. Like when we bring these discussions to our schools, young people are hungry to talk about this. When we invite adults from a myriad of different backgrounds together, they are hungry to engage. We just don't carve out the space to do that intentionally.
Right.
I think this is going to be really key to locating our agency and shaping this next chapter.
Because a lot of people don't have that experience to imagine what's possible. So again, it's human nature. We'll say, I'm going to just ignore that because it feels uncomfortable and orientation to change. And so we still have a lot of people just ignoring it rather than thinking about how do I exert agency and shape this. In fact, someone said to me recently, well, if if AI can create pictures that are fake, like we're done. Like we got to give up because you can't tell what's real anymore. Like that's one orientation, right? But if we think about it, and where do we have agency to shape this, and what are the skills we want to be developing? It's where I'd love to create more of those spaces, and so grateful that you are for people to start thinking about not only 20 years in the future, but like what do we start doing right now to shape that path?
Well, and I love that example in particular that you just gave because it's not a matter of if AI can create these things. It's AI is creating those things already, and young people are already using them. So, to your point, how do we want to disengage with that truth? And
Right.
so, it's already here, and there's ways in which you and that thread, which I really love. Like the reason why that one's so uncomfortable is it pushes on our core sense of what's authentic and real and where's our sense of trust. So I'll give you a couple examples of how that's already playing out for better and for worse.
Right.
In that example around truth and authenticity, you see young people using AI to help hone their voice. So at its best, it's they're working through ideas, maybe even if they're triggered by somebody else, they're helping to distill what about this matters, and then can you help me craft the communication to open back the conversation? And a lot of times it's like I'm mad this person left me on red, or I feel some kind of way about the fact that I just saw a group of people hanging out and I wasn't invited. Like these are very reasonable human things that
Yep.
occupy an enormous amount of space in an adolescent's development. And so AI can give them a tool to think it through and then re-engage. And there's a question of, is that authentic? If they've used a tool to help them hone their point to de-escalate and then craft language to re-enter into the conversation, is that real? And I think young people are increasingly saying, like, yeah, I mean, we can, and there's jokes, our fellows often joke about how you can suss out like an AI generated apology pretty quickly. But if you go back and forth enough to find your own voice in it, it can actually be a quite powerful unlock in relationships. The downside, and I think maybe the most dangerous downside, is what you were alluding to, which is it can be playful. Like my husband spent the weekend with Sora making videos of himself doing all kinds of things from like Superman to riding a camel to getting records. I'm like, stop sending me these videos. But he's having so much fun, right? So it's like a fun, and he's sending it to me, and it gets a good laugh out of from me and my kids. So in that way, it's fostering joy. But you could imagine a world where very quickly you start to worry, not only is what I'm seeing real, because even with just like Google Magic Editor, you can just change things very quickly in a photo, um, add it, replace it, can really change the meaning very quickly of an image. I often use a photo of a girl who in one picture is by herself, and in the next it has drug paraphernalia that someone added. And that one addition, one click that anybody can make changes the meaning fundamentally. And the most, I think, dangerous part of that is the nudification apps that are becoming quite common both in middle schools and high schools, where without consent, you can undress somebody, and it's predominantly women and girls that get undressed as a result of these apps. And so it does take all of a sudden something that is, um, if you're a young person, imagine it. If you're a teenager and you're imagining somebody undressed, that's frankly like a healthy, normal developmental thing to do if it stays in your mind. But when you click that button, all of a sudden it becomes dangerous and you become a perpetrator of harm. And we haven't yet taught young people new norms, and young people haven't claimed the cultural norms that they're going to want in this era. And so the fact that this stuff exists to me, just like it exists, and it's going to
Mhm.
bring humor, it's going to bring connection, it's going to bring reflection, and it's going to bring a lot of very serious harm. How we choose to engage with it and how we teach young people to think about what's going to guide us, the values and culture and norms that will guide us through this moment, that's all for us to decide, and to decide now. And it's time bound because those things will happen with or without intentionality. So that's the reason why I feel so urgent about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And you're leading the way in this. So as you've been doing this work, as a mom of two high school students, educators who might be listening, what are the ways you suggest maybe we start to have these conversations if it feels uncomfortable talking about these different apps, maybe not even knowing that some of these
Yeah.
exist? How do we start to engage in these conversations?
Yeah, I love that you're asking that question because just to give a sense of why that matters so urgently, 72% of young people have already tried AI, not just for homework help, but relationally. So they're talking to it about their feelings, their emotions. In some cases, they're using it as a resource to support it, but in other cases, they're actually using it as a companion in and of itself. So um, uh, maybe the way to describe a companion bot for someone who may not be thinking about that. This marks the move from where we use technology to relate to each other. So I get to have time with you, my friend, in this conversation via Zoom. Thank you. It's technology is connecting me, a human, to another real human. And then now to all of the people who get to listen to this. We're all connecting through technology. This marks a moment where you're actually connecting with the technology itself. There's not a human on the other side, but there's actually a large language model that replicates and simulates human interaction. And this is very common. In fact, um, uh, companions mark the fastest growing consumer market. It's a $28 billion industry
That is
already.
insane.
Yeah, so we have to just assume our kids are not just, it's like we think often in education about ed tech.
Mhm.
But the consumer markets are going to have such an outsized influence on how a young person shows up at school, at home. I mean, and that's early. We're still early. So imagine the investment that's going to be continued to made here.
So let's go a little bit deeper on that because so then we see the news reports and there are, children, youth who have committed suicide because they have a companion. That's like the extreme,
Yeah,
most horrific example. And so we see that, or we say just you can't use AI, right? So two
yeah.
extremes. But what you're saying is 74% of youth have already engaged with some sort of chat bot so that they're engaging in this conversationally to get advice, to get feedback, to just have a companion?
That's right. It's actually 72% if I'm getting the data right, but 50%, more than half use it regularly. 72 have tried it, more than half are regular users. So this is happening. And when we do our studies, we interview young people. And one of the most common things we ask, in fact, out of our last research, one of the last question we said is, what do you think adults are missing? And they said to us, we are using it and we're not talking to you about it because we can hear adults, we can anticipate and sense your fear about the technology and then the judgment and shame. And then to your point, an extreme solution, which is you're not allowed to use it. So we're just not telling you we're doing it. That's basically like the heads up from the kids. So the reason why I love your question about how do we engage in the conversation, it just stems from that wisdom that comes from young people who are saying, we actually want to have the conversations, but number one, not if you're going to approach it from a place of fear and judgment. And number two, remember, we're digital natives. So you might actually have something to learn from us.
Hmm.
Maybe there can be bi-directional learning. The teacher doesn't have to be the expert and student as passive recipient of information, but perhaps we have something to offer this conversation and together we could actually learn forward. So I love that, just the invitation to open up a conversation in our schools. To me, that in and of itself could be quite radical and really time sensitive.
Yeah.
If we start to think about AI literacy as not just technical skills, but also the reflection and human relational context, that feels really important.
Yeah, because there's this narrative, and I don't know the exact stat, but most educators feel like they're using, when they use AI, they're cheating, right? Even if people are using it, right? They are using it, but still they're not talking about it and being transparent because they feel like it's cheating. So
Right.
this idea then also, I'm pretending the kids aren't using it, or not really thinking about it. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on my own conversations with my kids. And my daughter will show me Snapchat and the new AI filters where they can like make a picture anything in Snapchat, and it has all this data of their pictures, so it's real, right? So you can say like, show me a picture of my two friends hanging out at the beach, and it just pops up. And my initial reaction was like, oh my God, that's so scary. And instead, if I can be more curious and how are you using this and how are you feeling about it? I think what you said, like, it's going to open up more conversation because she shared it and she wants me to see it.
Right.
But if I keep reacting, freaked out about it, then she's going to stop.
That's right. And I think there's so many important conversations or questions we can be asking in that moment, which is, like if she's showing you in delight, what about that's making you, why does that, what's so, like, tell me about why that's so fun or funny or like, what is it about that's bringing them joy? And then you can offer questions about how do you know if it's okay with your friends? How do you know? And so you can have really important conversations about consent, but it doesn't have to be a judgment based one or a you're not allowed to use this app anymore. It's more about, well, what would, do you know the effect that this has when they get to see themselves represented that way? Have you seen has someone else made an image of you? How did it feel at that point? Did that work? Did it not work? So I think those kinds of things just will allow us to be, again, so much more intentional about what are the kind of relationships we want to have with each other? How do we use this technology in service of that? And then when do we frankly need to walk away? Because it's not actually, it is actively eroding some of the trust and relational connective tissue that we desire as humans.
You're reminding me, I did a podcast with these two amazing young ladies who are seniors, and we were talking about AI and technology more in school. And they mentioned, which was totally surprising to me, that their friends are asking AI for relationship advice, and it's
Yeah,
impacting their relationships because they said they don't ask me anymore. So we
yeah,
don't have those conversations. We aren't going deep. They're turning to AI for that like feedback and advice, and that can definitely erode human connection and those spaces to bring us together.
that's right. I love that that came up. It's such an important nuance because what we often hear from young people is, well, why would I ask my friend for the advice? I don't want to impose.
Yeah.
And especially because my mind's racing, I'm getting ready to go to bed. They're either asleep or maybe they're getting ready to bed. It'd be rude for me to call them right now to ask for advice, I can just ask AI. It's available, and it, frankly, it gives me sometimes better advice than my friends would. So that's actually a productive use case. But if you do that over and over and over and over again, and you never get into the practice of turning to your friends to ask for help, then A, you miss the chance for them to know where you are and what you need. And B, we also lose the chance of offering help. Like one of the most important um, ways we can strengthen our not just relationships but mental health is to give, is to be of service. And so when you turn to AI instead of asking me for advice, you also rob me the opportunity to show up for you, which is really important, not just for you, but also for me. So I love that they were already diving into and noticing those nuances.
Yeah, and it makes me think of it, same thing of a teacher in a classroom, right? Like AI can be really helpful for feedback and correcting things and giving, like copy editing papers and all of that. And if we never talk to people about our writing or questions and we just rely on the technology, we miss that connection. We miss someone helping us understand and getting in the nuances of our questions and why we're thinking a certain way. Um, yeah.
That's That's right. Yeah, and by the way, I know already now from enough anecdotal evidence that college professors are reporting that their office hours are on the radical decline for this exact reason. I don't yet know how this is showing up in the teacher-student relationship at K-12 as much. And so if anybody's listening and has thoughts on that, just to know it's something I am actively curious about and would love to see and hear what people are experiencing around that.
My hunch is it is creating a decline because even when, I mean, this is 10 years ago when we started going one to one with devices, kids were telling me, I miss my teacher. The teacher now
Mm,
is sitting behind a computer looking at all of what we're doing online prior to AI, but just like tracking, and kids are on the computer and they're emailing for help instead of having that human connection. And so I can only imagine it's further creating that divide.
yep. Hmm.
So much more to dive into, but I want to take us into where are we going? Where looking ahead, you've done some research on pro-social AI. So as we think about um, our own interactions with people, our own use of AI, what are some things we should be paying attention to as we're leveraging AI that's really going to enhance the creativity, the connection, the empathy that we really want to carry forward?
Thanks for asking that. I want to speak specifically to the resource you just mentioned because I think it can be a really powerful tool for educators or parents who are listening to this, or just anybody who's honestly using AI themselves. What we did is articulated 5 principles for pro-social AI. And the intent was to try to say, let's look at things like whether or not an AI is being honest about being a machine and not a human. Because most have been, they are programmed to say, I think, I feel, I am, and then sometimes they explicitly take on a persona, a therapist, Harry Potter character, whoever, mafia boyfriend. So sometimes it will pretend to be an actual embodiment of that character or persona. And other times it's very upfront and clear. I can advise you on that from this perspective, but I'm a machine and don't actually have feelings? And so that's an example of one of these 5 different principles that help somebody know when should I proceed with confidence and I can trust that this is going to support my ability to pursue human relationships, and when should I be really cautious that there may be something dangerous here. And so we've articulated those, and I think what that really reflects to your question about where is this all heading, maybe I should say my hope is that we are heading to um, number one, a context in which young people and their educators and families um, are really conscious and critical consumers of AI. So they're able to deploy it in ways that allows them to not just accelerate learning, but also human relationships. And then they know when to actually put it aside and step away. And so that resource is one among another tool, actually, we just released yesterday called our Sparks Toolkit to help foster some of that reflection and also give people some practical look fors in conversation. The other thing I would say is, in addition to seeing a force of young people come up who are really reclaiming human connection and using AI as a resource and tool, I feel like that's a culture change. I really long to see. I'd also love to see us reclaim schools as a place of belonging. So, earlier I talked about this decline in the human intelligences, these ancient technologies that have brought us together and kept us healthy and whole as societies for millennia. And as you see declining institutions like religion or the commons disappear, we increasingly need our public infrastructure like schools to be a place where young people get nourished holistically, and as a place of real connection and belonging. And one of the things that we asked young people to do is to draw pictures for us over the course of their day, where they would chart when they felt most connected and when they felt least connected over the course of the day. And then we said, tell us about those highs and lows. Well, so this was one of the trends. Not, young people are not a monolith and they're in different schools, but we often saw something like this. There's like a spike in the morning, then a low, 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 flat, quick spike, low, 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 flat, and then it starts to go up in the afternoon. What do you think those lows are?
Classes.
Classes.
Yeah. So it's like the morning when they see their friends, then they go to lunch,
Lunch.
then they go back to the class, and then they leave with their friends.
That's right. So the irony of this, and I just want to state it because it's so crazy. We are spending so much time as adults, and not for poor reason, but most of our fear is about what young people are doing in their bedrooms on their screens by themselves. And almost all of our conversation and attention as a society right now is around that fear. There's
Mhm.
some valid concern to be worried about that. And yet, right in front of our faces, when these young people are together with their peers under
Mhm.
the guidance of a trusted adult, that's when they feel the least connected. That is so easy for us to fix.
It's so easy, and it just gave me chills because it's like you talk to, youth about this all the time. And again, the young ladies that I did the podcast with, they said the same thing. Like, we're dying for our teachers to engage us in conversations. Like, have us put our phone down, help us talk to one another, help us engage in conversation. They want to, but they're gonna disengage because it's uncomfortable unless they are facilitated and guided to do that. And like you said, it's easy. We can do it. We know how to do this as educators, and we can just kind of think about what is our purpose here and what do we want to do. And I think it would be so, so instrumental in the lives of young people if they had more of those moments.
And to your point, it does actually need to be taught as an explicit outcome in and of itself. So not only is it clear that strong relationships will increase outcomes for academic outcomes, but it also is a skill set that we can't take for granted. So um, I think about, how hard it is to be in relationship where you get mirroring that your opinion doesn't matter, or the fear of being rejected in a relationship. Those are really just the truth of messy human relationships that often is the source of so much fodder and growth. But it's really hard to choose it, especially if you're a teenager, and you have the option to go to a bot that tells you how great you are, that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has no needs of its own, can talk to you for as long as it needs to, as long as until you're done, and then can even look and sound however you want. It is very easy and understandable why you would choose that over the complicated, vulnerable, messy human relationship. So we really can't take this for granted right now. And in order to make it so that young people can choose those human relationships, we do actually need to teach those skills of collaboration and discourse and even self-regulation. All of that stuff is so critical, and yet we just really haven't prioritized it.
We have to model it as adults. We also have to recognize we have to practice those things too, which is why back to the beginning of connection and creating those spaces where you're productively engaging in conversations across lines of difference is something we all need to do. So if we're practicing that as adults, we're modeling and we're teaching young people those same things. We can't keep expecting that they have these experiences and they should just show up and know how to do it if we've never given them the opportunity to practice, given feedback. These are skills that they need to develop.
Right. So well said.
All right, we got to go rapid fire really quickly. I could talk to you for days on end about this and so many more questions. But as we close out, what is one thing we should stop doing in education or with our youth?
We should stop just teaching the brain and missing the body and the being.
Love it. What should we start doing?
Spending time creating real belonging and practice with human relationship skills in our classrooms.
What should we keep doing?
Loving on our kids, like at our best, the teacher and student relationship is just such a powerful, amazing force for good in the world, and we should just keep loving on our kids.
What is something that you're focusing on learning right now?
Oh, gosh, I feel like every week there's new emerging technologies, and so trying to keep myself, like we talked about, curious and uh, testing and learning, and then seeing what do young people think about this, not just me. What do I think about it, and what do they think about
Awesome. Uh,
it?
do you have a favorite quote or saying that is guiding you these days?
There's a Bree Donnelly was over with a group of people at my house on Sunday for brunch, and they said that they were these days thinking about an Adrienne Marie Brown quote. I don't know if I'm going to get the quote right, but the spirit of it is make the movement irresistible. And I just think in a world where these technologies are in fact quite irresistible. I mean, they're designed to do that. How do we build a better party, as my friend Nipun says? Like, how do we just make this way of being together as humans so irresistible that young people choose and actively choose human connection again and again?
I'm going to be thinking a lot about that. All right. What are you grateful for right now?
Oh, so much. I really feel grateful for the community around the Rhythm Project. Over and over again, I just get to show up and be in real relationship with the most exquisite people who are themselves curious and have differing points of view and are courageously choosing to lead at this moment in time.
Awesome. All right. Last one, your hope for the future of education.
That we will, within education, use that as a powerful vehicle to reclaim and evolve human connection in this age of AI.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you. I am so, so grateful for this time and your wisdom and all your work leaning in to create this space for connection and teach us all how we can move forward.
Thank you, Katie. It's so good to be with you.